for those of you who have experience with Python before, we're going to be using something called Jupyter Notebook, which is an IDE, which is essentially means it's an integrated development environment. It's a way that we can write code and essentially have the output shown to us immediately, which is really nice as opposed to, for example, like a command line environment where when you're typing things, it might be a little bit not as user-friendly. Jupyter Notebook aims to make things much more aesthetically pleasing. So for those of you who don't have this installed right now, what I would suggest is just following along with the notebook, following with the lecture, and then you could go along with the recording later on once you install it. You'll install it by installing Anaconda, which is the distribution that installs Python and a number of other different softwares that you can use for programming. So yes, you will have access to this notebook. I believe one of the moderators can share it as well as in a zip file. So what's great about Jupyter Notebook, just before we kind of get into the content here, is that can you guys still see my screen? Let me stop my sharing and start again in case it was. How are we doing? Looking good? Great. Okay. Also, how's the size of my font? Is this good size for everyone? I can make it smaller, I can make it bigger. I think this is kind of a good Goldilocks zone here. All right, great. So like I was saying, the good thing about Jupyter Notebook is that we're able to not only just have code, which I'll just kind of skip down here to a code cell. We have these different sorts of cells in Jupyter Notebook, and the cells are these different units that we can use to write in either code or Markdown, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But the cells are nice individual units where we can compartmentalize our thoughts and say, all right, this one thought is in this cell, and then the next thought is in the next cell, and so on. And so it's really useful to be able to do that. You can see here that this is a code cell, and I can tell that because I have this in and then this bracket and colon here. And I can change the type of cell by clicking on the cell here and then clicking on this here, and I can change to a Markdown or a code cell. So what we're doing here is I want to show that we can also have a Markdown cell, which Markdown is used primarily for just text, essentially. And it's actually quite, it's very relevant to HTML, which we're going to talk about today when we're talking about web scraping, which is because Markdown is somewhat similar to HTML in terms of the syntax. But essentially, Markdown is just a way to format text to make it look nicer. So for example, here we have a Markdown cell. We have a link up here, which is linked to this introduction or what is web scraping link that we have here, this hyperlink reference. We have a header, which we can change the size of our header by adding more or less pound symbols here. And then we could also have like bullet points, for example, by typing in these, these hyphens here to give us these bullet points. I can run a cell by clicking on a cell and clicking Shift Enter or Control Enter. And there's a number of other shortcuts we can look at by going to Help and then keyboard shortcuts. And there's a whole bunch of different shortcuts here. So here's the run cell or run selected cell. Things like adding a cell above or below. So B is something I use quite often. So if I click on a cell like this and I press B, the letter B as in boy, it will insert a cell below. I can press the letter X, the key X, which will cut a cell, and then I can press V as in Victor, which will paste the cell again. So I can just prove that this is my cell, and then I can cut it, and then I can press V to paste that same cell again, just to prove that that's the cell that I cut. Yeah, so there's a number of different keyboard shortcuts that I would recommend getting used to, at least reading through this list of them, because it's really, really useful when you're working for extended periods of time to have these shortcuts so you're not, for example, clicking these things up here, or it just makes things faster, just like shortcuts in any other sort of text editor. So let's talk about web scraping. So web scraping is great. I love web scraping. It's really fun. And what is web scraping? Well, web scraping is a way to take formatted text on the web and extract it and save it in a structured form, in a structured way. Okay, so let's say that you want to, you have some business and you want to inspect how products are being reviewed on Amazon. You want to look at those products that are similar to the products that you sell, and you want to see which products are doing well to maybe inform what kind of products you should be offering on your platform. Or let's say you want to look at, I don't know, like popular movies and like what types of movies are being rated highly the past 5 years. So because you want to produce some movie and you want to see what kind of movies are looking like they're popular, and so that can give you some insight into what movies might be good investment opportunities. So you know, there's a lot of data out there on the internet. Everyone should know that. But getting the data and putting it in a usable format is not something that's you know, that's easy to do, or maybe not that it's easy to do, but not everyone knows that they can do it. And so using web scraping tools like Beautiful Soup, which we're going to use today, is a really easy, a pretty simple way of using Python to extract data and either create data sources from scratch, data sets from scratch, or augment data that you already have. So let's say you maybe have a data set that you're working with, but you want to gather some additional data to maybe help with a machine learning assignment, or you want to, you know, maybe increase the predictive power of your machine learning model. Then you could use web scraping to gather additional data and then add that to your data set, and then hopefully that will increase your accuracy or whatever performance metric you're looking at. So definitely web scraping is a really great way to not only collect data, obviously, but it's also a good way to practice your Python skills. What I've found from web scraping is that you will always find and learn something new when you're doing a new web scraping project. You always run into an error that you haven't seen before. You always run into some issue that you need to debug. And people sometimes get worried or upset when they see errors, but when I see an error, it's always a good sign, because that's something new that I can learn how to prevent that error from occurring in the future going forward, and I become a better coder every time I encounter a new error. So you know, I encourage you guys to have that mindset when you're looking at when you encounter errors, because they can really help you become a better coder by giving you the opportunity to look at the code and see what is going wrong and how can I fix it and how do I prevent this from happening in the future. So so yeah, so I hope you guys feel the same way when we go through this project here, this short exercise that we have here, because web scraping is really a great tool. It's really, I find it very fun, and you know, it's a good challenge, and keep your skills sharp. I also have in this notebook a number of links, so you can visit our website to look at our residential online or online boot camps or our professional development programs. And also we have this admissions at NYC datascience.com. If you guys have any questions about our program or just anything in general, our admissions officers are top notch. They're really great. And so they'll be happy to answer any questions for you guys. Okay, so what is web scraping? Web scraping is using technology. It doesn't have to be Python. It could be other languages. For example, Java or JavaScript. They use other web scraping tools as well. And it's used to extract information structured information from the web. Okay, and then we can store it somewhere that we can use, for example, using pandas to do data manipulation, or you know, we load it into R, for example. We could use dplyr to do certain mutations on the, you know, we can change the data and perform operations on the different columns and things like that. So before we kind of understand how to do web scraping, we need to understand what HTML is, because HTML is really at the core of what web scraping is aiming to tackle, I should say. So HTML is short for hypertext markup language, and all of you are familiar with HTML, even if you're not super sure, maybe you haven't seen it before or haven't really worked with it specifically, but if you see it, you'll probably recognize it. So I'm sure many of you guys have accidentally pressed F12 on your browser before and seen this pop up. And this is something that we're going to get familiar with later on, because this is the way that we extract the different pieces of information from a website. So a website is written in any website is essentially written in HTML, which is a language that we use to represent graphical images, or you know, just formatting of a browser, and it's just text, right? So I want you all to start thinking about when we're visiting a website, all of this stuff, even though there's, you know, this text here, but for example, let's go to Yelp, and let's just see what Yelp looks like. If we'll ever go there, let's here's Yelp, right? Here's the Yelp website. And we can see there's like some text here. There's like some, images, things like that. But there's a number of other graphics here. But what I want you guys to think about when it comes down to it, all of this is written in text. This is all written in HTML, which comes down to this this source code here. Okay, so all of this source code, which is all just text, is going to code how this website is formatted. Okay, and that's something that we need to understand in order to be able to extract, for example, how do I get these titles from these restaurants here, right? How do I extract these titles? Well, these titles are they're links to their website, but they're somewhere embedded in this source code that we're going to look through. And the tools that we're going to teach today are going to give you easier access to finding those elements within the source code, so we don't have to look through these incredibly dense, levels of source code, which get very, very dense. But there are tools, thankfully, that we could use to help ease our searching process. So hypertext markup language is a language used to present web content in a web browser, right? Plain text is turned into an HTML document through the use of tags, which we're going to talk about a little bit, and they're interpreted and displayed by the browser, whether you're using Mozilla or using Chrome or Safari, whatever you're using, Opera for maybe some of you. So we're going to use something called Beautiful Soup, which is a library that allows us to easily extract the tag values from the HTML source code. So Beautiful Soup is all it really is a text parser, right? So what it does is it searches through a whole giant string of text, and it kind of organizes it for us, and then it allows us to search in that text for certain tags, for certain attributes and things like that, and we're able to go through that and pick out the pieces that we want. And so that's what Beautiful Soup is helping us to take all that source code and organize it for us so that it's much easier for us to extract what we're looking for. So let's look at a sample HTML document. So here, for those of you using Mac or Linux, you can use this command here, this cat data / hi8.html. I am on a Windows, so I'm going to run this type command. So this is a comment for those of you who maybe are not familiar with this. The pound here before a string of text in a coding cell, notice this is a coding cell, I can see it says code up here, will essentially say, hey, I don't really care about any of this stuff. This is not actual code. This is just for my own notes. So it's really for just documenting your code. So I can kind of add a pound sign here and remove it in order to remove or to designate what should be run in this cell. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to uncomment this line here, and I'm going to run that, and we can see my HTML source code here. Okay, so this is a very simple HTML file, and it has these tags here. And so this is an HTML tag. An HTML tag has an open and a close tag, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Here's an HTML tag. Here's a head tag. Here's a title tag. Here's a comment. So just like we have comments in Python, we have comments in HTML as well. Here's an A tag and a body tag. A tags are always links to different websites. So when we see a link on a website, that's going to be an A tag, which stands for anchor. So it's essentially taking a piece of text and anchoring it to a hyperlink reference, which is going to bring you to a different site. So just a quick example of an HTML document. We're going to kind of parse through this in a little bit. Let's first talk about what we might want to get. So for example, for 75% of the time, for the most part, maybe 70 or 65, what we want to extract from a website using web scraping is the text between tags. So the text or the value of a tag is the string that's located in between the tags, the open and closed tags. So here we have a title tag, and that's actually up here. Here's our title tag right here. And the value of this title tag is high, okay? I see some of you guys are having issues with opening the HTML source code. If you're having issues, don't really worry too much about it. I would say just follow along. We can debug later, but essentially what this is looking for this data folder, which is inside the zip file that you guys have received. Make sure also that you unzip the zip file and that you're working with the folder as opposed to a zip file, because you might actually get issues if you try to open this as a zip file. There should be links to the zip file in the, here, I just posted it again. So there's the Google Drive link. Okay. So again, if you're having issues, I would say just follow along with me, and then we can do debugging later. But the more important thing is that you follow along with the lecture and then understand kind of what's going on. And that way you could kind of go ahead and maybe follow along on your own pace when you get it working later on. You could follow the video, things like that. So let's say we're trying to extract this value high from our title tag. Okay. So we can do this in two of many ways, but two ways. If you guys, I'm not sure if you're familiar with regular expressions, but regular expressions are patterns of strings that allow us to match different kinds of strings. So for example, when we're using regular expression, one regular expression pattern or meta character is the /d. And what /d it means is we want to match a string that has any digit in it, right? So this would match both of these. It would match them separately. For example, if we have like, I am, 30 years old, this kind of thing, right? This would match 3 and 0 because this is a digit pattern for regular expressions, okay? So the regular expression is really just trying to find some characters, some character pattern and match that and then extract that. And so what this is doing here, the period character essentially in a regular expression is saying match any character except for new line character, I think. So this period will mean literally any character. And just to really quick to show you guys something, there's this Regex 101 website, which I like to use. And so we can say, if this is our pattern, so here's our regular expression here. And if we type in this, except, we put high inside here, this regular expression, this pattern up here is going to match this high string in between here. So that's what this group thing is doing here, is it's matching any character, 0 or more times. So that's what this modifier here, this quantifier here is doing, is it's saying I'm looking for any character 0 or more times between these exact strings here, which is to open title tag and close title tag. Okay, so we're not going to be talking too much about regular expressions this time, but I just want to show you that this is what this is matching, is that it's matching any string whatsoever inside between these tags, right? So that's what this pattern is doing, is it's matching any string that's inside this tag here, which is what we're looking for. So this is a way to find the, so what we're doing here is we're essentially opening a file which is pointing to this HTML, this hi.html file. So here's our hi path, which we've just defined here. And as we open this file, we're going to read this file. So this is now, this function returns a file connection object. And it's going to, we're essentially saying that f is referring to that file connection object. We're opening it in read mode. And then what we're saying here is we're saying hi is equal to f.read. Okay, so f.read, this read method, is going to read f as a giant string. Okay, and so the giant string in this case will just be this text here. Okay, so it'll just be a giant string. And then we're going to set that equal to hi. And then within this hi string, we're going to try to find any matches that match this pattern here. Okay. So this pattern here is going to match if we see an open tag and a closed tag and then anything in between it, which we do have, which is right here. Okay. So if I run this, it's going to print out that one match that we find, which is hi. So this is one way to get that that value from between the tags out of our source code. This is one way using regular expressions. Now another way, which is the way we're going to focus on today, is using something called Beautiful Soup. So if you guys have Anaconda installed, you should have this BS4 library, and from within the BS4, which stands for Beautiful Soup 4, we have this Beautiful Soup object. RE stands for regular expression. So this is a regular expression module. If you don't have experience with it, I would recommend looking it up because it's really great for data cleaning and just extracting strings in general. So regular expressions really, the RE module here, really useful for data cleaning and just extracting text from giant strings or formatted strings, things like that. So Beautiful Soup is a class from within the Beautiful Soup 4 library here. And we're going to import that because Beautiful Soup is going to parse our giant string of text for us. And then it's going to essentially compartmentalize and organize all of our code or our source code so that we can say, hey, I want to find the title tag, and then I want to find the value of that tag. Okay. So let's do this in pieces here first. So what we're going to do is we're going to read this hi path a second time, and we're going to store it in something called hi, and then I want to just return what hi is. I should do this at the end of our cell. Where are we going here? There we go. Okay. So what we have here is this is just our HTML file, right? This is our source code here. So that's what hi is it's a giant string and then I can even put it here maybe just to show what it looks like. This is just a one long string with some new line characters. There's some spaces in between, things like that. Okay. Now let's do the second step here, which is now we're going to use the Beautiful Soup constructor. So this is just like, for example, if we want to make a list, we can say list like this, and this will give us an empty list. This is our dictionary constructor or integer constructor or a float constructor, right? All these different things. This is a Beautiful Soup object constructor, right? So this is the class Beautiful Soup, and it takes two arguments. It takes a string that we're trying to parse, and then it takes something that's designated what type of parser we want to use. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're saying we want to parse HTML in this case. And so there's also like an XML parser and other types of language of web languages. But in this case, we want to use an HTML parser. Okay. So we're passing our hi string here, and we're going to make this Beautiful Soup object. So let's go ahead and run this again, and let's see what we see. So it looks like we have this text again for this string, but it's formatted differently. We don't see it's not surrounded by or enclosed by quotes. So we can actually look at the type of our hi object here, which is this Beautiful Soup object. Okay, so we know now that we have a Beautiful Soup object. So now that we have this hi object, we can call different attributes from this hi object. So for example, here, if we want the title tag, which is what we're looking for, in this Beautiful Soup object, we can say hi.title, and that will return the title tag, the first title tag, in fact, in the document. Because there's only one, we get the first one here. And then also, we can call from hi.title, we also have this .string attribute, which will return the value of the title tag, which can be useful, like in this case, where we want to actually get the string hi, or the value of that tag. Okay, so this is just kind of an introduction here. We're going to go down to more the anatomy of an HTML document, and then what we can do. So we have a question here: is .string different from .text? .text is you might be thinking about Selenium. Selenium uses .text, which is another web scraping tool, which will allow you to essentially scrape pages that have infinite scrolling kind of features, or pop-ups that show up, or generally websites that use something called AJAX, which is asynchronous JavaScript and XML, which tend to be newer websites that might need to use these newer types of technologies. For example, Beautiful Soup can't scrape Twitter for the most part, as far as I know, because Twitter is just an infinite scroll, and so you can only get the source code that is loaded when you first visit the page, because we're scraping the actual, parsing the actual source code that we're looking at, as opposed to Selenium, which is a different tool, which will actually launch a robot browser, and then actually will like use the browser like a human would, and it's very interesting to use that. Let me try to stop my sharing and then try it again if there's some glitching going on. Just let me know if that helps. Okay, so let's move on to the anatomy of an HTML document. So in this case, we're talking about the title tag. And if I go ahead and open up this, let me open up this HTML file here. So if we look at data and we look at this hi.html, notice that it'll pull up this very simple website, which is it's being launched from my local file system because it's located on my in my downloads folder. But notice that the hi string is in the tab, so it's like the title of the tab. And then also we have this a tag here, which is our Hello Beautiful Soup, which will bring us to the Beautiful Soup website here. So the title tag denotes what is going to be in the head of the browser. So tags are always enclosed by the left caret and the right caret, the less than, greater than, and that's going to distinguish it from the content of the website. A pair of tags consist of a start tag and an end tag, which have the same name, but the end tag is preceded by a slash. Okay, so here's an example of the title tag. Here's our open tag, and here's our close tag, right? So the close tag has the slash before the name of the tag, and then they enclose some value and whatever else, maybe other tags, right? So there could be nested tags, and in fact, it's very often the case that there will be nested tags. And so this tag, the title tag with a value of hi, okay? So the hi here is a string, which is a value of this tag, okay? So again, around 75% of the time, this value of the tag is what we want to get out. So for example, like the numbers, this is one of the websites that we scrape here. Let's look at this daily chart here. So let's say we wanted to scrape this here. These are values of the tags that they are they belong in. So for example, if I open this up, and we'll go over this in a second, or a little bit later. But if I click on this element here, we can see that we have an a tag here. See, here's the open a tag, and then here's the close a tag, and then here is our value of the tag here, right? So this is let him go, which is the name of the movie here, I guess. And then, so for example, here's focus features, which is another a tag, and this one has a value. So many times, 75% of the time, you want to get the value of the tag, as that's going to be our scrape data. Okay. Now, sometimes tags will have another feature called attributes, and an attribute is kind of like a it's like a quality of a tag, right? I guess its attribute is kind of the best way to describe it. It's another identifier for a tag. So the tag can have a name of the tag, the actual value, the name of the tag, which is like title or head or body, but it can also have attributes, and the attributes aid in distinguishing this particular tag from other tags in the document. So a tag can have 0 to many different types of attributes, but only one of each type. So for example, in our example above, we have this a tag, and this a tag has an href attribute. And we see here that we have this href equal to some string. Does this format here remind anyone else of a Python data structure? This part here, if we see this. Yeah, exactly, like a JSON or a dictionary, right? So this, we'll actually see later on that these attributes are actually stored in a dictionary called ATTRS. So we'll see that the way that these attributes are set up here is that we have the name of the attribute followed by an equal sign, and then a string denoting the value of the attribute, okay? So in this case, this is an a tag, and then a tag stands for anchor tag. And so whenever you see, for example, this kind of link like this, we will have an a tag. And actually, even in my Jupyter notebook here, if I inspect my a tag here, we'll see that there's an a tag here with a hyperlink reference. So the href stands for hyperlink reference. And so the idea of the a tag is to just link some text to anchor it to some other link somewhere else. The hi.html file should be within the data folder inside the folder that's shared that has the notebook. So there should be a data folder that has hi.html and article, which is another one that we're going to look at. So I want to separate some terminology here. We have the value of the tag, which in this case is this piece here. It's this text between the open and the close tag. Notice that the attribute is inside the open tag, right? So it's always going to be, all the attributes are going to be inside the open tag. This is the value of the href attribute, and I want to make the difference. I want to point out the difference there, that this is the value of an attribute, whereas this is the value of the tag. Okay, and so I want to make sure that that terminology is clear, because it can be kind of confusing later on. Okay, so we can have multiple other attributes, tag attributes. There's things like class, things like ID, there's things like, sometimes there's like data something or data tracker, things like that. There's lots of different types of attributes that can be assigned to different tags, and they're used to essentially differentiate for a tag from other tags on the page. So for example, there may be many A tags, there may be many links on a page, but only one of them probably has this href equal to this. I mean, maybe there will be multiple, but this is a way to differentiate this A tag from all the other A tags on the page. And that can be very important when we're trying to extract specific pieces of information or specific elements from the page. So you can think of a HTML source code as kind of this tree structure here, which in this case we have, and let me just do this type data slash HTML dot, what is it, hi.html. Let's look at this again. So here is our parent tag, right? This is our root tag, which is HTML. And then you can think of this as like a child tag or a child node, right, of this root node here. And so we can see that we have, from HTML, we have these two children tags, and these are sibling tags. So we have head and body, which are siblings, and then head has a child tag called title, and body has a child tag called A. So title is the child tag of head is the parent tag of title. So we use that terminology here. So a good way to kind of think about this is it's using this tree analogy, or this kind of genetic passing down kind of family tree kind of analogy, I guess. Okay. So let's start working with beautiful soup objects and see what kind of things we can extract. So there's this prettify method, which is a beautiful soup object method, which I'm just going to run this here to show you what it does. And that is, it just kind of formats the text of the beautiful soup object a little bit nicer. I'll say I rarely ever use this prettify method because many times when you're working with source code, it's going to be hundreds and hundreds of lines of code, not something like this that you're going to be manually looking through. So it's not, I mean, it does make it look nice and pretty, but you're not going to be like kind of looking through the source code manually to find certain things. You're going to be using things like these inspect tool and this kind of element selection tool that I'll teach you in a little bit. So again, let's kind of go over what we're doing here. So we're importing the beautiful soup class from the BS4 library here. We're going to open this hi path, which was before it was data slash hi.html. So I'll just put this in here so it's very explicit. So we're opening this file, this HTML file in read mode, and we're calling that return of that function f. And this function, this return of that function is this file connection object, and we can call this .read method on that object to get a giant string that has that gives us a giant string that has all the HTML code in it. This print new line character will actually print two. So print by itself will actually just print a new line. So this will print just one single new line. If you put this, it'll print two new lines. So this is kind of unnecessary, but it's just to kind of put this space between these two pieces here. So now that we've read that giant string in, what we can do is pass that to our beautiful soup constructor here as our first argument, and we can parse that using an HTML parser, which we're denoting by saying html.parser here. And what we get back is that we get back that beautiful soup object and what we're calling hi. And so we're going to print out the type of hi, which is printing out here, so we can see that it's a beautiful soup object. And then we are going to print out hi.prettify, which is going to just essentially just format our text, which is not super useful for right now, but it just kind of makes it look nice. I'm happy you think so, Daniel. Thank you. The data slash hi.html is within the Google Drive link. That there's a folder, the zip file that you can download from there, and within that zip file there's a folder called data, and in there's an HTML file. All right, so let's talk about these different attributes or methods and attributes that we have that belong to this beautiful soup object that we've created. Okay, so what we have here is some of the main things we want to get from a tag are the name of the tag. So is it a title tag? Is it a div tag? Is it a p tag? That kind of thing. We have the value of the tag, which is the string that's enclosed by the open and close tag. And we also have the attributes of the tag, which can be very useful sometimes because Sometimes we want to scrape, for example, all the links on a page, like all the A tags. We want to get those href attributes. And then we want to use those links and we want to visit each one of those pages and then maybe scrape more information from each of those individual pages. So like I was saying before, 75% of the time you want to get this, which is the value or the string, which is there. But sometimes we want to get attributes, and that's generally like the other 25% of the time where we want to get, for example, things that are in the attributes. You want to get like references, so like URLs to other pages, because we want to follow this trail to get to the actual page that we want to get, and we want to automate that process. So we can run this, which is going to, from this hi beautiful soup object, we have an A tag, and then we can say the name of the tag, which will just return A because it's an A tag. We can say a.string, which will give us the let me just print this out again. It will give us the value of that tag, data/hi.html. So I can just do printify here. So I can do hi.printify instead. It's probably a better way of doing this, and then print that. So here is our value of our A tag. So here's our A tag, right? Here's the open and the close tag. And then the value of this A tag is hello beautiful soup. So hi.a.string will return the value of that tag, which is hello beautiful soup. Okay. And then hi.a.attributes, this attrs thing, like I said before, is a dictionary which contains the key. Each key will be a different attribute, and then the value will be the value of that attribute. Judy has a question, will the second argument of this beautiful soup constructor always be HTML parser? It will be if you're working with HTML source code. If you're working with XML, there are other types of parsers available. But for the most part, when we're doing everything that we do in this notebook, we'll use HTML parser. And then what happens when there are multiple tags, multiple A tags? That's a great question, and we're going to get to that in a little bit. So this will only return the first A tag that it encounters in the HTML document, and that's not always what we want to do. So we're going to talk about how we get that, the subsequent tags later. So this will show us the that if we try to get the string out of a tag that doesn't have any values that are directly inside of it. So for example, this HTML tag here has a bunch of other tags nested within it, but there is no text, there's no value between HTML and this HTML close tag, right? There's only other tags. There's no actual value that belongs just to this HTML tag. There are values of other tags inside, but this string attribute that we're calling on the tag object is not going to give us the strings that are nested within that tag. It's only going to give us the tag's direct value, or if it has one. So this is going to return a none type object because there is no string within this HTML tag. In order to get the tag, the values of all nested tags of every child tag from the tag that we're currently looking at, we can use this getText method. So the getText method is going to return the value of every child tag in the document. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing this because there's probably going to be a lot of text in all of the child tags of the HTML tag, which the HTML tag is pretty much every single tag is going to contain every tag in the source code. So this would not be a great thing to do generally. But for example, if you have a head tag and you want to get all of the values within all the values of the child tags of the head tag, you could do so we could do hi.head.getText, and that would give us all of the values of those child tags, which can be useful. Now, what happens if we want to extract an attribute of a tag, the value of an attribute? Well, what we can do is we can do this hi.a, which is our A tag, right? And then we can do .get, and then we can pass the name of the attribute we want to extract. And this will return the value of that href attribute for that A tag, okay? So this, hopefully for some of you guys, you recognize this from as a dictionary method. And this is essentially just skipping the step where we're doing this, where we're calling the get method, which is a dictionary method where we pass the name of the key, and it will return either the value of the key or none if the key doesn't exist. So for example, if I say, non-existent here, this is going to return none as opposed to giving us an error, which is useful. So we're skipping this step here. Can we use slicing with the get text method? You can slice the string that gets returned. That's definitely true. What if there are multiple h references? So there will only be one href per a tag, because if you think about it, if you click on a link, there can only really be one anchor, to a different link. If you click on, if it has multiple hrefs, I'm not really sure what page you would go to if you clicked on the link. So there's only one href for a tag. Can we also use read HTML from pandas? I don't really have a lot of experience with the read HTML function from pandas. I'll have to look into that. That sounds interesting. Okay, so I just want to point out that again, that this hi.a.attributes is returning a dictionary where the keys are the attribute names and then the values are the values of those attributes. And that can be very useful. Like, for example, if we want to scrape all, like, let's go to Yelp again, which we're going to use later. Let's say we want to go to locksmiths, right? And let's say we want to, on this page, we want to scrape all of these are all A tags, right? They're links to different pages. They're hyperlink references anchored to this text here. And let's say we want to scrape all of these businesses, the links to their business, and visit that business page, and then go and do other scraping things. Like we want to get like the hours of the business, like maybe how many reviews it has, its location. A lot of that stuff is located here, but maybe there's a lot more stuff on the individual business page. For example, like here we go to this one, we can see when it's closed, COVID updates. Maybe that can be important, especially for people doing analysis about success of businesses during COVID, maybe. And then especially the reviews, which is we're going to look at this later. This is what we're going to be scraping in a little bit. So if we want to scrape all of these pages individually, we can scrape the A tags from each of these pages, get the href value, and then make a list of those, and then visit each of those individual pages, and then get whatever we want from those pages by visiting them, right? Yes, the get method is going to return the value of whatever attribute you pass as a string. Okay, so let's talk about the find and find all methods. So I'm going to just comment this out, and let's go for Windows users. We can see here, this is a second example that we have here, which is this article.html file. And this one is a little bit more complicated in that we have here we have a body tag with some H1, H2, and H3 tags. These are essentially going to make the text of these within these tags different sizes. So similar to how I do a markdown cell here, and I say this is header 1, this is header 2 with 2 of these, this is header 3. So we're going to see when we open up this this document here that we can see that there we have a big text for 1, smaller text for 2, and even smaller text for 3. And then actually not within these tags, but adjacent to these tags, so sibling tags, we have these p tags. And I want to point out that these tags have meaning to them, right? They're designed in a way to be informative, because the web developers that are making these web pages, they want to format their website in a way that's easier for them to parse and and work through and kind of organize. So a lot of the times these tags will have meaning. For example, A for anchor tag, which is important to denote that something is an anchor using an href, a hyperlink reference. P tag, which is usually going to encompass some sort of paragraph or text, right? H1, meaning that this is a header. Body, which means this is the body of my tag. Head, which means it's going to be the name of the title tag, the tab, I mean, okay? So what we're going to do now is we're going to go through and look at this document. We're going to make a new beautiful soup object and try to look at these these new methods that we're talking about here. So here's our article path, and I can just kind of paste this in here if I'd like to, but I'm just going to call it article path. We're going to open this new file object in read mode here, and then we're going to read our file into article, which now article should be a giant string, which I'm going to put here, and just to prove to you guys, this is just one long string. And then we're going to convert it into a beautiful soup object by using this beautiful soup constructor, passing our string and then our HTML parser. And now article is now our beautiful soup object. So once I run this, we should have this beautiful soup object, which is called article. So let me just make sure. Yes, so here's our beautiful soup object. So let's say we want to get the p tag from our article object, okay? Now, when we do .p, this is only going to return the very first p tag, which is not generally, this is not really what we want. We want maybe all the p tags. We want all the text inside of on our web page, right? This is equivalent to using the find method, which this find method, we pass the name of a tag to it, and it will return the first encounter of that tag, okay? So these two are equivalent, where we do article.p and article.findp. These are going to give us both are going to give us the first p tag that it encounters. This find all method is going to find every p tag in the HTML code and return it to us. And that's what it does. It returns this what looks like a list, but it's actually this, I believe, is called a result set. Yes, it's a result set, but this is actually, it inherits from lists, so it's a subclass of list essentially. So it pretty much behaves like a list. If you're having issues with the running of the loading the file, you might need to what I would do is just essentially take the file from the data folder and drag it into the working directory where your Jupyter notebook is located. So wherever this notebook is located, just drag the both HTML files into that same directory. That way you can just call it by saying article.html or just hi.html, because that way you don't have to talk about, like, you know, absolute file paths, things like that. It'll just be there. So that should help. Although going forward, we're actually not going to need those files at all. We're actually going to download the HTML source code from the different websites that we want to scrape. So find all tag will give us each of the tags, will give us all of the tags that we specify. So in this case, we get all 3 p tags, which is what we wanted. Now, sometimes we don't want to get every single one. Sometimes we want, sometimes what we want is we want to say, give me all the p tags that have an h1, that have like an h1, or I'm sorry, not an h1, like that have an ID attribute or something like that. Or give me all the div tags that have class attribute equal to, data test or something like that. We're able to use the find all function, where we can pass the method, I should say, where we pass the name of the tag, and then we can pass a dictionary saying, I want my ID attribute equal to 1 for these tags. Now, this ID attribute is going to be unique for every tag on the page. So what I'm trying to say is that if we have a page, some source code with an h1 tag, and the ID attribute is equal to 1, no other tag on that page will have an ID attribute equal to 1. This is completely unique. It doesn't matter if it's a different type of tag. This ID attribute will always be unique, okay? So this being unique, we should only get one h1. Now, there only happens to be one h1 tag in our article HTML document. I gotta print this. Now. So there's only one h1 tag, but we will only get one thing back if we specify what the ID is, because ID is unique for all of those. When do we use article p instead of article.findp? They're interchangeable. That should be fine. Okay. So one other way we can use this find all method is that we can pass a function to it. And the function needs to be a Boolean function, meaning the return of the function needs to be true or false. So in this case, this is an anonymous function. We're using lambda syntax here. And what this is going to do is this method is going to apply this function to every single tag in the source code. And it's only going to return those tags that return true for this operation here, okay? So what this is saying is for every one of the tag objects in our source code, we're going to try to do tag.get and then ID. And if that is equal to 1, that will return a true. If this is not equal to a 1, it returns a false. So this is only going to return the tags in our source code, that have ID attribute equal to 1. And in this case, it should only be a single one, which is this h1 tag. We have a question. What's the difference between find all like this and find all like this? I'm not familiar with this method, so I can't really answer that. So that could be a method in a different package or something, but we use the find underscore all method for Beautiful Soup here. Can we use Beautiful Soup to scrape popover content in HTML? Generally, no. That's a great question. That's when you would use something like Selenium, because anything where there's dynamic elements on the page where things are popping up or the page is loading dynamically as you scroll down, you need to use something called Selenium, which is a different type of technology. Lambda is essentially, this is a way to define a function. This is one way to define a function. I would, if you're not familiar with this, I would look up Lambda function definition. Just Google that, and I'm sure you can find lots of resources. But it's essentially a way for us to define a function that we'll use once and then not really have to give a name. So we call it an anonymous function, because this function, if I take this and put it over here, this is just a, whoops. This is returned, this is a function object, right? This is a function object, but it doesn't have a name. So what we can do is we can say, for example, I can say, tag finder, and now I gave it a name. So now we have this function called tag finder that I can use, but generally you don't define functions this way. This is really just for defining anonymous functions very quickly. Okay. So I went through a lot of stuff here, and it's already 7 o'clock, but I would like to go through this Yelp example because I'm sure that's why a lot of you guys are here and interested in learning how to do this using a real example. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna scrape some reviews on this Yelp restaurant page, or this Yelp restaurant page called ABC Kitchen in New York. And so what we want to do is we want to scrape this information here for each of these reviews, and there's a number of pages as well, right? So there's a number of pages here. This is just our first page, and I think there's 20 reviews per page, but you can see there's 148 pages of reviews. And so we would like to scrape every single page of reviews as well. We don't want to just get the first page. So, by the way, the code we're writing today can be easily extended to other restaurants. So essentially, you just paste in a URL for other types of for other restaurants, and it will work just the same way, because Yelp has the same format, and we're banking on the fact that when we're writing these web scraping rules, I guess, we're banking on each page having the same kind of layout, because we need that sort of consistency in order to scrape the data in a reliable way and in an automated way. Okay. So before we get started with that, we need to talk about the request library. So essentially what we've been doing before is we just have some static local files that we're using to load to read our source code, right? But that's generally not what you want to do. When you're, for example, here, I don't want to have to download the source code here and then load it into Jupyter or into Python. We can use something called the requests package here. There's a method called, or a function called get within that request library. And there's different types of HTTP requests, and get is one of those, okay? And so I'm going to go over just two of these here, which is the get and the post. So whenever we say, for example, if I want to go to bestbuy.com, this is a get request where I'm saying, as a user, I'm requesting the source code from the server to send it to my browser and have my browser getting the source code from the browser. I'm sorry, I kind of tripped up in my mind there. We send a get request to the server. The server sends us the source code of the page, and then our browser renders that source code for us, which is really useful because we can now browse on the website and stuff. Now, sometimes the server says, "Hey, you're not allowed to access this," or "I don't understand what you're asking me," things like that, and then we get other kinds of like errors and things like that. But that's kind of that's what a get request is. A post request is when we send either keys or information to the server that changes something on the server side. So for example, when you're logging into a website, or you're logging into Gmail, or onto Yelp, if you're logging into your account, you have to put in your username and password. When you click send, that's sending a post request to send data to the server to validate your permissions, right? So what we're going to do is we're just going to use get here, okay? So what we're going to get, we're using this get, and what we're saying essentially here is we're passing a URL as a string to this get function, and that's going to give us back something called a response. So we use from the request library here, we have this get function. We send a get request, and what we get back is a response. And I want to just look at this response object here so we can talk about it. So when we just return this response object, we're going to get this response and then this number here, which is our status code. 200 is a good status code. That means you're good to go. You got exactly what you wanted back, and so you should be good. Things like 300 are redirect errors. 400 are bad. So if you get a 400, like a 403 or a 404, I'm sure everyone has seen the 403 or the 404 where you input like a wrong, some wrong. Let me see if I can get it real quick. I don't want anything bad to pop up. So, one sec. It's not really working. Well, I'm sure you guys have seen it before, where you see like the little, the little dinosaur, and it says, we can't find what you're looking for, that kind of thing. That's a 404. 403 usually means that you are not permitted to access the content. So it'll say, you don't have permission, you're forbidden from accessing the site. So that's usually because you didn't enter in your password correctly, or you don't really have the correct permissions to access the site. So 200 is good to go. Other things that we have in this response object, we have this text, which is, I don't know why this is reloading, taking so long. The text will be the actual source code. So that's like when we read in our file and we did f.read, this is what we get from that. So here in this case, we're getting a timeout here, which is not good. Give me 1 second. Yeah, robots.txt is definitely something to check out. That kind of All right. Well, Yelp is having some technical difficulties right now, which is awful timing. But let's see if we can maybe do a different site just to show you guys kind of what's going on. So let's go through this first, and I'll kind of talk about it. And hopefully by this fine, okay, it's working fine for Yelp. Let me see. I could have just gotten banned, honestly, with the request that I'm doing, but I'd be surprised if that was the case. Oh, here we go. Okay, cool. All right. So let's look at this response thing again. Let me do it one more time so I get a correct response object. Yeah, it could be that everyone's accessing Yelp, although hopefully that they know how to handle that, because if however many people are in this webinar are accessing it and that's crashing the Yelp service, they got a serious problem. There's a link for that website here, which is the HTTP request. Here I can 1 second. I can just paste that in the chat here for you guys. But that will be located on in this Jupyter notebook too. So the link is here. All right, so back on track. So we have this response object here. Let's look at response.text, and we have this bad gateway again. Hold on. I may need to use the user agent. So let's do that real quick. My screen froze. All right, hold on. All right. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to pass a user agent. Oh, actually, let me just finish my thought here. So once we get this response object, when we actually get the correct source code, response.text will be that long string that we got when we were reading in the file from before, right? So that's important to know, that we're getting that long string, and That's what we're passing to our beautiful soup object, so we can parse that and then create this thing that we're calling text, okay? Now, you're seeing that I'm getting this 504 error, which it's not like a permissions error. It looks like it's something on the server. 500 errors are server-side errors, meaning that they're having trouble giving me some sort of some response. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use a user agent. And a user agent is very useful, and I recommend using it often. What a user agent is it's essentially telling the server what software you're using to access the site, right? And so this makes a difference because let's say you're using an older version of Chrome, or you're using a new, like a version of Safari, or you're using like a mobile browser, things like that. The source code that you're sent will be different based on what user agent you're sending to the server. And it's also a good way to kind of trick the server into thinking that you're actually not a robot and that you're not doing this automatically. You're actually just trying to, you're just a, nothing suspicious about me. I'm just looking to access the site. I'm just a normal user. So I would recommend using a user agent when you can, because you can avoid getting banned, which can happen. Your IP will be banned, at least for a little bit, if you try to access some sites without a user agent, because they'll say, hey, you're a robot. Either they'll try to give you a CAPTCHA, which you'll have to try to, which if you run into CAPTCHA, that's a big problem. If you can solve that, then you can make $1 million, because there's a competition going on to try to fool CAPTCHAs. But if you run into CAPTCHA, that's usually game over. Although there are some things you can do in Selenium to kind of try to get around that. So what we're going to do is we're going to make this headers thing, which is a dictionary. And this dictionary is just one key, which is called user-agent. And then our user agent is this. And if you guys want to find your user agent, just Google what is my user agent, and that will give you this part right here. And so you just copy this, and that is your user agent. You're good to go. I would recommend doing this. At least, if your Chrome updates or whatever software you're using updates, try to do it again. But use that for your own site, because like I said, if you're looking at a source code that's returned for a certain user agent, and you're not and that's not the user agent for your browser, then you might see source code that in your browser that is different from the source code that you download. Okay, so that's important to point out. So here's my headers. I'm going to pass that as an argument in my get function call here. So now we're passing the URL as my first argument, and this headers equals headers thing to pass my user agent to my request.get function. And that will give me a response. And then from that response, I'm going to extract the text, pass that to my beautiful soup object here, and then create my text object, which we're going to use for our workflow here. So fingers crossed. Let's check out text here. And just to check, I'm going to check response.status code 200. We're good. Cool. Now, what I was saying before is that if you do text.printify for a page this big, or this complicated, I should say, not going to be super useful, right? No one's going to be looking through this, but it is nice for smaller things if you'd like. Okay. So something we need to find out is the pattern in the URL for the different codes here, or the different review pages here, okay? So let's wait for this to load. I'm going to open up Sublime. If you guys don't use Sublime, I suggest using it. It's a really nice, smart text editor, which can really be helpful for doing things like writing Python scripts. I use it for writing for Scrapey, which is another web scraping tool. Interesting. All right, that's working. Sorry, just bear with me, guys. All right, well, let me just continue and kind of show you what I was trying to do here. So the point is that let's try to get this one, see if it works on this side. Let me see if I go to just Yelp and then I can show you for a different site, different restaurant. I mean, oh, it's working now. Of course, I closed it. My bad. One sec. Here we go. Okay. So now that we're here, what I want to point out is that notice in our URL, the first URL looks like this, and it's kind of hard to see. So let me put it over here. So this is our first URL. Now, if we go to this, and this is like the very first page here, okay? Now, if we go to the second page of reviews here, notice that we get this question mark start equals 20 thing, okay? And then if we go to the next page, take my word for it, it goes to 40, and the next page goes to 60, and the next page goes to 80, okay? So hopefully you guys can start seeing the pattern here, which is that every page has 20 reviews on it, and it increments by 20 to get the next URL. So what we want to do is we want to generate all of the URLs for every single review page so that we can essentially loop over each of these, like loop over a list of these URLs and say, all right, get the response from this page, right? Now get the response from this page and then get the response from this page. So that's exactly what we're going to do, which is we're going to have to try to find the URLs of each of the pages and then get a list of every single page. So how do we do that? Well, what we can do, there's two different approaches. We can either get the total reviews, which is here. So here's the total number of reviews we have. Since we know that there are 20 reviews per page, which I just found out by counting how many reviews there are per page, I could divide this by 20, and then that would tell me, for example, how many times I have to make URLs for. So for, this divided by 20, let's see, we're at like, so it's like 2970 divided by 20. That's about 148 and a half pages, which is correct because down here we could see that this is 148 pages, right? So the other way we can do it is we can scrape this number, this 148, and then generate 148 different links. So whichever way you want to do it is up to you. I kind of like this way better because I just have the number of pages automatically right there instead of having to calculate how many pages there are. So I'm going to go through my last page approach. Now, you're going to notice that I have this temp variable that I'm setting this long string to a bunch of times. And the only reason why I'm doing this is because this is the class attribute. This is one of the attributes we're going to have to find. And I'm storing into this temp variable because I want to be able to put it here in my function without having this function explode off the page. So I'm just setting it equal to this temp variable so that I can neatly put it in here and we can see the whole line of syntax here. So you don't have to have it go all the way off, okay? So something we need to talk about now is our handy dandy inspect panel, which is this thing that pops up. You can also get it by pressing F12, but if you right click on the page and then click inspect, it'll pop this thing will pop up. And so we want to be on the elements tab, and this will show us all the elements on the page. Okay, and and then the tags that kind of tell us the address for that element. Okay. Now up here on the left, there's a selected element in the page to inspect it. So there's this element inspection tool. And if I click this, I can go down here and I can hover over different elements that I might want to look at. In this case, I'm looking for this piece here because I want this 148 text. And you can see that this is a span tag, right? So here's span. It has a class attribute equal to lemon, blah, 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 span, all this stuff. And then here is our value, which is what I really want, okay? Now, this is on the second page, and we're actually going to be looking at the first page, but just trust me, it's the same tag here. So I'm going to copy this part here, right? So I have this class attribute, and then I'm going to paste that in the string here, which is the same, should be the same string, which it is. And then what I'm going to say is I'm going to say from my text source code, my text beautiful soup object, I want to find the span tag where the class attribute is equal to this long string. And then from that, I want to extract the value, right? And so if we do that, it's not liking that. So let's go to the first page and see if it's different. So let's see this. Here's our class. It's not liking it. Interesting. Okay, let's try this one. This one's not working either. So let's double check my my response.text, which I believe looked okay to me. There could be an issue with the server giving me the correct source code, but I don't think that's the case. But let's run this one more time just in case. Oh no, that's not what I wanted to run. Sorry. So let's run this one more time. Let's double check the response.txt, or the status code, sorry. 200 looks good. Let's try this. All right, now we're working. Cool. All right, so this is our total reviews approach, but I like this approach, which is finding that last thing. So now I want to point out what we're actually doing here really quickly. So let's return num pages, which is, this is what we're going to get. We're going to get 1 of 148, which is important because we want to get this number here. And so what I'm doing next is I'm using this re.findAll function that we talked about earlier. And this is saying I want to find all the digits that are one or more digits in that string. And so what this is going to return, this is going to return a list of 2 values, the 2 digits in my string. So it's 1 and 148. And what I want to do is I want to get the second one, because remember Python is indexed from 0, not from 1 like in R. So 1 will mean the second element, and I want to get this element, and then I'm going to convert that into an integer. And that's going to be my number of pages. So that's what's happening here. Then from this number of pages, what I can do is I can do a list comprehension here. And if you guys aren't familiar with list comprehension, I suggest looking into it because it's a really nice way to generate a sequence of different things. In this case, I have this formatted string, which here's my string, and then I'm saying I want to replace, remember this is what our pattern was for each review page. And so I want to say I times 20 is getting inserted here as the value for I in range number of pages plus 1. So from 0 to 148, I want, those are the values of I here, starting at 0. So starting at 0, so if we did here, if we did this and then 0, that should give us the very first page of reviews, which I'll show you down here. This is the first page. There you go, first page. And then the second page would be, remember, start at 20 and then start at 40 and then keep going. So this will generate all the URLs for every single review page we have, assuming that there are 148 pages, which is what we just found. Okay. So now we have these review URLs. We're going to come back to this later. This is something we're going to kind of put aside for now. So next up, we want to find all the review divs on the page. Okay, so we haven't talked about, or review divs are the LI tags. So let's look here again. And here are the LI tags. So if I kind of search around here until I find something that is encompassing this entire piece. Actually, we could even just get this thing, which should be fine, because I think all the information we want is in here, but let's get the whole thing instead. So here's our div, and then we actually want not this, but this piece. And you can see as I hover over these tags, it'll highlight the actual elements that are here. So here we have, you can see there's a UL tag, and inside this UL tag, we have a number of LI tags, and each one of these LI tags is a separate review. So LI stands for list item, I believe. So that should be a hint that we're looking at these different LI tags. So I want to say, I want to collect all of these LI tags in a result set like we did with the P tags earlier, right? So I can double click on this class attribute here, which will give me this value. And then I'm going to paste that in here, which is the value of my my class attribute for LI. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say the reviews on that page is equal to text.findAll, all the LI tags where class attribute is equal to this temp thing that we just copied, which is this class attribute. And then I'm going to print the length of reviews. So if we print the length of reviews, we can see there are 20, which is good. And it's kind of hard to see here, but these are all these LI tag elements inside our result set. And we should have 20 because there should be 20 per page. Okay, so now that we've gotten all of these LI tags, we want to look at one specifically and see if we can extract the information from that LI tag that we want to save in a, for example, like a CSV file or something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the first element from my reviews result set and set that equal to something called review. So let's try to get the rating from our reviews here. So the rating, it looks like it's this thing here. Okay. Now, I don't see anything. There's no value, but there's something called an ARIA label that says 5-star rating. And maybe this is an attribute here. This ARIA label is an attribute, and this is the attribute value, right? So maybe this 5-star rating thing can be our value that we're trying to extract to get the rating that this person has given. And just to double check, I want to check this to make sure that this is changing based on the review, because sometimes when it just says 5-star review, sometimes that means it's out of 5 stars and it's not going to change for every review on the page. But we can see here that this actually does change. This one is a 2-star, and we can see that it says 2-star rating here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, I'm looking for the div tag. This is a div tag here. Let me move this over a little bit so it's easier to see. So div tag with class equal to this long lemon thing. This is my string that I want to collect. And then I want to extract the ARIA label attribute, right? So in this case, we're not extracting the value of this tag. We're extracting the attribute value of the ARIA label. So I'm going to replace this here. Sorry, I want the span tag here, actually. So I actually want this span tag up here, which is sometimes the case because sometimes using this class attribute will not give us the tag we want. Sometimes it's very often we want to go up one level to the parent tag and then be less specific with the tag below it. So for example, that's what we're doing here, which is we're saying find the span tag with class equal to this, and then find the div tag directly below that, right? So once we get this thing back, we're going to get a tag element, and that tag element we can call this find method on to get the div tag, which is a child tag of that span tag. And then from that div tag, we want to get the ARIA label attribute, which will return that attribute of whatever the ARIA label attribute value will be. Now, I want to point out here that we're not using text like we did up here, right? We're not using the full Beautiful Soup object. In this case, we're using review. And this is really important because we're using something called the relative tag. So what that means is we're not looking in the entire, if we said text here, this would mean I'm looking in the entire HTML document for the first span tag that has class equal to whatever we happen to note it to be. If we put review here, this review, remember, this is from this list of LI tags that we have. And so if I put review here, this means starting from the LI tag that we talked about before, this is our LI tag, starting from this place, let's look for the first span tag that has whatever, class attribute equal to X, okay? And that's really important because what we've done here is we've narrowed our scope so that our Beautiful Soup object, or the tag element that we're looking on, we're only extracting the text from this one review element. And that's really important because we don't want to get all of these things all at once. Like we don't want to get all the ratings at once, or all the content at once, or all the dates at once, things like that. Because if there are missing values, these different lists of these sequences of values will not match up, which can be a real problem. So a good way to approach this is to go and look at each item individually, extract the information, and then store it in a dictionary, which is what we're going to do. So what we're doing here is we're extracting that 5-star rating or 2-star rating or whatever. And then again, I'm using regular expressions to extract the value of that rating. So here we get the rating 5. I can look at the second one, and that will show me that I get 2, right? Because we saw that the second rating is a 2-star rating. So I'll change this back to 0. Now let's get the date. Let's get the date here. So I'm going to use my selector tool. I'm going to click on this date here, and we see here that we have the span class equal to this, and then here's our, so here we actually want to get the value of the tag, right? So I'm going to double click on this, and that's going to be my class attribute, and I'm going to paste that here. And then I'm going to say from my review, right, from my narrowed scope, I want to find the span tag with class attribute equal to this thing here. And then I want to get text in this case, because here you could do get text, you could do string, either one is fine. Get text will work fine, and that will give you my date back. And then finally, we want to get the content of the review, which is this piece here. And we can see this is a p tag, and then underneath that we have a span tag, and then inside the span tag we have these values, these different values here. Okay, and notice that there are these breaks in between these paragraphs. So we want to get the span tag, this class attribute here. So here's my class attribute, and then find the span where the class attribute is equal to this temp thing, and then I want to get the text. Notice I don't want to do string here. I think, yeah, string will give me none because of all those break tags that we have here. So notice there's these break tags here. So I want to just use get text, which will give me all the, all the string, the entire string underneath that tag, even the child tags as well. Okay, so we've gotten these three pieces of information. Now what we need to do is we need to write, we need to do it in a way where it's automated, okay? Or at least more automated than what we have it here, because we don't want to have to say, for example, you know, I don't want to have to do this over and over again and change the number. That's not how you want to code. You want to code so that it is automatic, which is what web scraping is designed to do. So we want to apply this to all the reviews on the page and save it to a CSV file. So let's first talk about the CSV thing. So we're importing the CSV module or library here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to open a new file called reviews.csv in write mode, right? So we've been opening in review mode, not review, in read mode recently, but now we're going to open in write mode. Be careful that if you have any file that whatever file you put here, if you have something that exists already, this will overwrite that when you run the cell. And there's no like, are you sure you want to do this kind of thing? So make sure you be careful when you're doing this, especially like, you know, if you do run it a second time and you overwrite your original data, make sure you change it to like a different name or something like that, which can be important. The encoding I don't think really matters right now, so I'm going to remove that. But sometimes the encoding will matter if they're like Latin characters with like accents on them and things like that, so you can add that in there. So we're going to call this CSV file. And then in here, what we're going to do is we're going to, from the CSV module, we're going to call this writer function and pass the CSV file connection object. And then we get back this other object called review writer that we're calling it review writer. Essentially what you need to know here is that this CSV thing is going to help us write a CSV file. It's very difficult to write your own CSV file manually because sometimes the values that you, like the text that you have, will have commas in them. And CSV files are called CSV files because they're comma separated value files. So if you have a value like a piece of text or a string that has a comma in it, and that's part of the text you want to write to a CSV file, you can't do it manually because the file will think that you're adding a new column or something there. So that will be a big problem. This CSV file writer will help us with the different types of, if the text has commas in it. Okay. So the important thing to note here is that the file object is passed here into our csv.writer function, and then review writer is the thing that we can use to write rows to a CSV file. So what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to put this in here. I'm going to say review writer.write row, which is a method of this review writer object, and I'm going to pass date, rating, and content, these three strings to be written to the CSV file. And this is going to be my header row. Okay, so write the header row. So that's the first row that I'm writing to my CSV file, and that's going to be the header row. Okay. Now, what we have here is this. Remember, we had this reviews thing, which is a collection of LI tags, right? And so what you can do is we're going to iterate over the LI tags, and for each of those reviews, we're going to make a new dictionary. we're going to find the date, rating, and content, right? And so we're going to use just like the same exact syntax that we used above for these different things, except we're just going to put it inside this for loop here. And then we're also doing some stripping, which is going to just remove white space if it exists, that kind of stuff. And then we're going to store these 3 pieces of information as values in our dictionary. So we're going to say dictionary date, that we're going to add the date key is equal to this date, whatever we just extracted. Dictionary rating key is going to be equal to rating, whatever we just extracted. And dictionary content is equal to content, whatever we just extracted. And then finally, what we're going to do is we're going to say review writer.write row, and then our dictionary here dot values, which is going to give us essentially an iterable of the values in our dictionary as opposed to like the keys. Okay. So this will write our collection of values to our CSV file. So if we run this, I should see inside my folder here, this reviews CSV file. And we'll see here that we'll have the date, let me make this a little bigger for you guys, the rating and the content. And you can see this is my header, and then here are our different pieces here. So this is us scraping, we're scraping data here, that we're actually doing some scraping here. Now, you notice that there are these extra lines here. That's sometimes there's a bug. It might be a Windows bug, but you can put a new argument here called new line equals empty string, and that should solve that problem, which it does. Okay. Okay. So that's just one page of reviews, though. We're not done yet. We want to do this to all the pages. So remember that we had those URLs that we made earlier. So first, what we're going to do is we're going to make a function that essentially just takes this piece here, this for loop, and wraps it in that. We're going to wrap that for loop in this function. So this function is going to take a reviews object, which is our result set of li tags that we made earlier, just like here, right? So it's a collection of li tags. It's going to take the CSV writer also as an argument. So that's this review writer object that we're going to make. Okay, so this is I like to call it a typewriter object. So essentially, this typewriter object has a method called write row that allows us to write these rows. This is going to be that typewriter object that we're passing to our function. And then inside this function here, all it is the for loop, and then we're going to make a dictionary, and then review writer. I'm sorry, this should be CSV writer. So I'm going to change this to review writer just to be consistent here. So it's called review writer in the function, so make sure you change this to review writer. Otherwise, this will not work. I can send out an updated version of this notebook as well. So review writer here. This function is just going to write 20 rows, one for each of the reviews for each of these this collection of li tags. And then we're going to write some code here to actually do this. So what we're going to do is we're going to make this new reviews.csv file. We're going to make our typewriter object, right, by making this file connection object and passing it to the writer constructor. There's another typo here. I have to change this. I'll send this out to you guys as well. And review writer.write row. So here we're writing our header row, right? Now, what we're going to do is for index, comma URL and enumerate URL list 1. I want to show you guys what this is doing real quick. So if you guys aren't familiar with the enumerate function, what it does is it takes a list of or an iterable of something, and it makes this generator. And if I convert this to a list, what it's going to give me is it's going to give me a list of tuples. The first element will be, by default, it starts at 0. So if I do this, it'll start at 0. But if I add a second argument here, it'll start at 1. So it essentially keep track of the position of each element. So it'll wrap each element into a tuple where the first element is the number and the second element is the value itself. So what we're doing here is we're keeping track of the index and the URL, so we can print these out, and that way we can say, all right, what page number are we on, and we can keep track of that when we're running this thing here. So index will be our current count, or we can call it count or index, whatever, and then URL will be the actual URL. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say response is equal to request.get URL, which is our current, like whatever current URL we're working on in the for loop, and then we're passing our headers as well. So this is giving us our response object. we're going to take the text from the response object and create a beautiful soup object from this beautiful soup constructor, and then store that in text. Then from the text object, we're able to find all the LI tags, right? And so that will give us this reviews object, which has all our LI tags. And remember, we're doing this for every review page that we have because we're iterating over that list of URLs, okay? Then what we're going to do is we're going to run this function, which we defined up here, which is going to take our reviews LI tags, our result set of LI tags, and our review writer typewriter objects, because we need to pass that so we can write the rows for each of the elements. And then what we're going to do here is we're actually going to try to trick the server by sleeping for a random amount of time. So this rand int function is going to select a random integer from 1 to 3, and time.sleep is going to sleep for some X amount of time. So what we're doing here is in between accessing a new site, we're going, and I'll make this a 2 just so we don't have to wait as long. But in between trying to get to the next page of reviews, we're going to wait randomly 1 or 2 seconds so that we can make it look like we're an actual human, as opposed to just spamming the server with requests, which is not good. You don't want to do that because that's how you get banned. And then this is just showing us that we're what page we're on by logging the progress. So I'm going to run this, and we should see these finished page start popping up, and it should just start going. And once we do this, now we are scraping, right? We are scraping all the reviews for all of the, for that ABC restaurant, ABC Kitchen restaurant. And that we can get all the reviews, and we can maybe do like things like comparing different ratings over time. So we can do some sort of, some sort of moving average or something. If you want to do some sort of time series analysis, we can look at the content of the ratings to see if users are more interested in, like if there's lots of keywords that are coming up, like maybe there's a certain dish that the restaurant released recently and they want to know if people are interested in it. So there's a lot of different information analysis we can do with this this data that we're scraping here. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, right? There's so many other sites that you guys can scrape using this technique. I encourage you guys to go and try what we did here on other pages. I will warn you that this XPath what we're doing here, trying to find the path to these different elements, does take some getting used to, and it does take some practice. But the more practice you do, the more comfortable you get with it, and it really becomes very fun to work on this stuff. And each little project is like a really, it's like a thought problem, and it's really, I find it very entertaining and very and fun. So I hope you do as well. I suggested a site here called quotes.scrape.com. And this is a really simple site that you can use to practice your scraping on. You could use Beautiful Soup to scrape this site. So I would recommend trying this out, maybe going through the same workflow that we did here, but try it with Quotes to Scrape and see if you can get that to work. Okay. And finally, thank you for joining. I know I went over time today. Thank you for those of you who stayed and stuck it out with me. I hope you guys learned something from this webinar. I'm going to make sure that we have a second. I'll update this notebook and send it to so that we can send out maybe to all the participants the updated version of the notebook. Yeah, thank you guys for joining. If you guys have any questions about our program, or just about us in general, or what we have to offer, I have more information here about how you can get in touch with us. You can email admissions. You can email me. I can paste my email here as well, which you guys can use to reach out to me. I'm happy to talk about all things data science and Python, anything you guys want to talk about. But yes, thank you for joining us.